The rushing river's roar drowned out Olivia Evans' desperate cries for help as the floodwaters crashed against her cabin, the wooden structure groaning under the assault of nature's fury in the spring of 1879. Fort Collins, Colorado had never seen such rainfall, transforming the usually peaceful Cache La Powder River into a raging monster that devoured everything in its path. Olivia pressed her back against the far wall of her small cabin, the water already knee-deep and rising rapidly. At 22, she had prided herself on her independence since arriving from Boston just 8 months prior. The schoolteacher position had offered her escape from the stifling expectations of her family, but now she wondered if she'd made a fatal mistake coming west. Help. She screamed again, knowing it was futile with the thunderous downpour drowning her voice. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away, and most townsfolk would have sought higher ground hours ago when the rain began. She had foolishly believed her cabin, set on a slight rise, would remain safe. The water climbed to her waist as she clutched her most precious possession, a locket containing a portrait of her late mother. The cabin's furniture floated around her, crashing into walls as the current pushed through the structure. A sickening crack told her the foundation was giving way. Half a mile downstream, Kieran Prescott fought to control his panicked horse as they sought refuge from the deluge. At 26, the cattle rancher had seen his share of flash floods, but nothing like this devastation. His herd was safely on higher pastures, but he'd stayed behind to help evacuate the scattered homesteads along the river. "Easy, Thunderbolt," he soothed, patting the nervous stallion's neck as they watched uprooted trees and debris rush past. That's when he heard it, faint but unmistakable, a woman's scream carried on the wind between thunderclaps. Kieran squinted through the rain, scanning the landscape until he spotted the small cabin downriver, water already surrounding it. His heart stopped when he saw a pale face in the window. "Someone's still in there," he muttered, dismounting and tying Thunderbolt to a sturdy oak on higher ground. "Stay here, boy." Without hesitation, Kieran removed his heavy leather coat and boots. The cabin was already beginning to list to one side, and he knew he had minutes at most before it would be swept away. Taking a deep breath, he plunged into the churning waters, using his powerful arms to navigate the current. Olivia gasped as the cabin lurched suddenly, the floor beneath her tilting. Water poured through the windows now, and the door had been torn from its hinges. The roar of water filled her ears as she climbed onto her table, the last piece of furniture not yet submerged. Tears streamed down her face, indistinguishable from the rainwater dripping from her soaked hair. "Please, Lord," she prayed, clutching her locket tighter. The cabin groaned again, timber splintering as one wall began to separate from the others. A sudden movement at the doorway caught her attention. A man tall and broad-shouldered fighting against the current, his determined face focused solely on her. "Hold on," he shouted above the roar. "I'm coming for you," Kieran battled the raging waters, his muscles burning with the effort. The cabin was breaking apart before his eyes. He'd seen the woman's terrified face, noted her delicate features and the flash of copper hair. Something in him refused to let the river claim her. He reached the doorway, gripping the frame to steady himself against the powerful current. The interior was chaos, furniture colliding, water swirling violently. The woman stood atop a table that rocked dangerously with each wave. "Jump to me," he called, extending his hand. "The whole thing's coming down." Olivia stared at the stranger, a cowboy with dark hair plastered to his forehead and intense blue eyes that somehow promised safety. The table wobbled beneath her, and she knew she had no choice. "I can't swim well," she admitted, terrified. "Trust me," he replied, his voice somehow calm amid the chaos. "I won't let you go." With the last of her courage, Olivia leaped toward him just as the table overturned. For a heart-stopping moment, she felt nothing but rushing water, then strong arms encircled her waist, pulling her against a solid chest. "I've got you," Kieran assured her, his breath warm against her ear. "Hold onto my neck and don't let go." Olivia wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his shoulder as he turned to face the current. Behind them, the cabin groaned one final time before collapsing with a thunderous crash. Kieran felt the woman trembling against him, her slender form surprisingly light in his arms. The current pulled at them mercilessly, but he was a strong swimmer and knew these waters. Angling his body, he let the river's force help carry them toward the opposite bank where the land rose more steeply. Almost there, he encouraged her, though his own muscles screamed in protest. Olivia kept her eyes closed, praying silently as the stranger fought to keep them both above water. She could feel his powerful strokes, the determined rhythm of his breathing. This man was risking his life for her, a complete stranger. Finally, Kieran's feet touched ground. With renewed strength, he pushed forward until they reached shallower water, then scooped Olivia into his arms and carried her the remaining distance to dry land. They collapsed together on the muddy bank, both gasping for breath. "Thank you," Olivia managed between gulps of air. "You saved my life." Kieran pushed wet hair from his face, taking in the woman he'd rescued. Despite being soaked to the bone, her beauty was evident: fiery hair, emerald eyes wide with lingering fear, and a delicate face that stirred something in him. "Kieran Prescott," he offered, still breathing heavily. "My ranch is about a quarter-mile up this ridge." "Olivia Evans," she replied, suddenly aware of her sodden dress clinging to her form. "I'm the schoolteacher in Fort Collins, or was everything I own was in that cabin?" Kieran glanced back at the river where no trace of her home remained. "I'm sorry about your place. The river's never risen like this before." Olivia fought back tears. "I should have left earlier. Everyone warned me, but I thought I had time to save more of my things." A flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed immediately by a crash of thunder. The rain continued unabated. "We need to get to shelter," Kieran said, rising to his feet and helping Olivia up. "My horse is waiting up there. Can you walk?" Olivia nodded, though her legs felt like rubber. She took a step and winced, her ankle protesting. "You're hurt," Kieran observed, immediately bending to examine her ankle. "Not broken, but a bad sprain." Here, before she could protest, he lifted her into his arms again. Olivia found herself pressed against his chest, acutely aware of his strength and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Mr. Prescott, I can't possibly—" "Kieran," he corrected, "and you can. I've carried calves heavier than you, Miss Evans." "Olivia," she offered, surrendering to the necessity of his assistance. They made their way up the ridge where Thunderbolt waited impatiently. The massive black stallion eyed Olivia warily as they approached. "He's not used to ladies," Kieran explained, setting her down carefully beside the horse. "But he's sure-footed and will get us to the ranch safely." With practiced ease, Kieran mounted first, then reached down to pull Olivia up before him. She settled awkwardly against his chest, unused to riding in such a fashion. "Hold on," he instructed, placing her hands on the saddle horn before wrapping one strong arm around her waist. "The trail's rough, especially in this weather." The journey to Kieran's ranch seemed both interminable and strangely intimate to Olivia. Each jolt of the horse pushed her back against the cowboy's solid frame. She was acutely aware of his breath warming the nape of her neck, the strength in the arm that held her securely. By the time they reached the ranch house, a surprisingly substantial two-story structure, the rain had finally begun to slacken. Kieran dismounted first, then reached up to help Olivia down, his hands spanning her waist easily. "Let me get Thunderbolt settled, then I'll see to your comfort," he said, leading them to the covered porch. Olivia stood dripping on the wooden boards, the reality of her situation sinking in. She was alone at a stranger's ranch, without possessions, without proper clothing. The schoolhouse where she taught was in town, likely also affected by the flooding. Everything she had built in her new life was gone. When Kieran returned minutes later, he found her trembling, tears streaming silently down her face. "Miss Evans, Olivia," he said gently, ushering her inside. "You're safe now." The interior of the ranch house surprised her. Unlike the bachelor accommodations she had expected, the home was well furnished with simple but tasteful pieces. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and comfortable chairs were arranged nearby. "My sister visits often," Kieran explained, noting her expression. "She insists I maintain some level of civilization. The previous owner's wife had good taste." He busied himself lighting the fire while Olivia stood uncertainly in the center of the room. "You need dry clothes," he said matter-of-factly. I'll find something of my sister's. She keeps a trunk here for her visits. He disappeared upstairs, returning moments later with a simple dress, undergarments, and a towel. They might be a bit large, but they're dry. You can change in my sister's room, first door on the right upstairs. I'll make some coffee to warm you up. Olivia accepted the clothing gratefully. You're very kind, Mr. Prescott. Kieran, he reminded her, his blue eyes softening, and anyone would do the same. No, she said quietly, not anyone would swim through a flood to save a stranger. Upstairs, Olivia peeled off her sodden clothing, using the towel to dry her long copper hair. The dress Kieran had provided was indeed too large, but blessedly dry. She found pins in a drawer and managed to secure her hair in a simple twist before descending the stairs. Kieran had changed as well, now wearing dry denims and a flannel shirt, his dark hair still damp but combed back from his forehead. He looked up as she entered, a strange expression crossing his face. The coffee's hot, he said, gesturing to the pot on the stove, and I've some stew warming. You must be hungry. Olivia nodded, suddenly aware of her empty stomach. Starving, actually. I haven't eaten since breakfast. They settled at the kitchen table, an unexpected domesticity in their movements as Kieran served the stew and Olivia poured coffee. For a moment, they could almost forget the circumstances that had brought them together. How long have you been in Colorado? Kieran asked, breaking the silence. 8 months, Olivia replied, savoring the rich stew. I came from Boston to take the teaching position. Fort Collins needed a schoolteacher and I needed. She hesitated. A fresh start, Kieran suggested. Olivia looked up, surprised by his perceptiveness. Yes, my parents died within months of each other 2 years ago. My father's sister expected me to become her companion, to settle into the life of a spinster niece. I couldn't bear the thought. So you came west alone, Kieran said, admiration evident in his voice. That took courage, or foolishness, she replied with a self-deprecating smile. As today's events might suggest. Not foolish, he countered. Brave, many wouldn't risk the unknown. What about you? Olivia asked, curious about her rescuer. Have you always lived here? Kieran shook his head. I grew up in Texas. Fought briefly in the war when I was barely 18, then worked cattle drives until I could save enough to buy this place 3 years ago. The previous owner was heading back east, wanted to sell quickly. Your parents, both gone, he answered simply. Just my sister Catherine remains. She lives in Denver with her husband. They fell into comfortable conversation as they ate, discovering shared interests in books and music. Kieran revealed a surprising knowledge of literature that belied his rugged appearance, while Olivia spoke of her passion for teaching. The children here are wonderful, she said warmly. So eager to learn, so different from the privileged students I taught briefly in Boston. They value education because they understand its worth. And now, Kieran asked gently, what will you do? Reality crashed back upon Olivia. I don't know, she admitted, her voice small. The school might be damaged, my possessions are gone, I had some savings, but the town will rebuild, Kieran assured her. Fort Collins is resilient, and you have a place here until things settle. Olivia stared at him. I couldn't impose, it's not an imposition, he interrupted. Catherine would never forgive me if I didn't offer proper hospitality. Besides, the roads will be impassable for days, maybe weeks. Later that evening, Olivia stood at the window of Catherine's room, watching the rain finally cease. Stars began to appear in breaks between the clouds, their light reflecting in the puddles that dotted the ranch yard. Below, she could hear Kieran moving about, his footsteps a comforting reminder of his presence. What would have happened if he hadn't seen her? The thought sent a shiver through her body. She touched the locket at her throat, the only possession she had salvaged, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having moved eastward. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Dressing quickly in another of Catherine's dresses, she made her way downstairs to find Kieran cooking breakfast. Good morning, he greeted her, looking unfairly handsome in the morning light. Sleep well, better than I expected, she admitted, though I had dreams of water rising. Kieran nodded sympathetically. Those might continue for a while. I still dream of a cattle stampede I survived years ago. After breakfast, Kieran suggested they ride into town to assess the damage and let people know Olivia was safe. Someone might be worried about you, he pointed out. My landlady, Mrs. Cooper, perhaps, Olivia agreed, and the school board will wonder about the schoolhouse. The ride to Fort Collins revealed the flood's devastation. Fields lay underwater, fences had been washed away, and debris littered the landscape. As they approached town, they saw people already beginning cleanup efforts, the community coming together in the disaster's wake. The schoolhouse, situated on higher ground, had survived with minimal damage, though water had seeped under the door, warping some floorboards. Olivia's relief was palpable as she examined her classroom. My books, she breathed, running her hands over the shelves that held the school's modest library. They're safe. Kieran watched her, moved by her dedication. The children are fortunate to have you as their teacher. They continued to Mrs. Cooper's boarding house, finding the elderly woman directing cleanup efforts with remarkable vigor. Olivia Evans, she exclaimed upon seeing her. Thank the Lord, I feared the worst when they said your cabin was gone. Mr. Prescott saved me, Olivia explained, gesturing to Kieran. He pulled me from the cabin just before it collapsed. Mrs. Cooper eyed Kieran with newfound respect. Well, Mr. Prescott, it seems we owe you a debt of gratitude. Our Miss Evans is a treasure to this community. Kieran tipped his hat, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same, madam. Nonsense, the older woman snorted. Most would have seen to their own safety first. You're a brave man, Mr. Prescott. They learned that while several buildings had been damaged, no lives had been lost in town. The mayor was organizing reconstruction efforts and the community was rallying. You're welcome to a room here, Mrs. Cooper told Olivia. Though it might be a few days before we're properly habitable again. Miss Evans is welcome at my ranch until things are settled, Kieran offered. My sister's room is available and it's no trouble. Mrs. Cooper raised an eyebrow, her expression speculative. Well, that's very generous, Mr. Prescott, though tongues might wag. Let them, Olivia said with unexpected firmness. Mr. Prescott saved my life. I trust his character implicitly. Kieran felt an unfamiliar warmth at her words. Few had expressed such faith in him before. As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, Kieran found himself studying Olivia's profile against the blue sky. Something about her drew him, her courage, her intelligence, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of her students. The days that followed established a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Kieran tended his ranch while Olivia helped with household tasks and assisted in Fort Collins' recovery efforts. Each evening, they shared meals and conversation that grew increasingly personal. Olivia learned of Kieran's dreams for his ranch, his hope to breed horses as well as cattle. Kieran discovered Olivia's passion for education reform and her desire to establish a proper library for Fort Collins. A week after the flood, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a comfortable silence between them. The town council is offering me a small cabin near the school, Olivia said finally. It will be ready by week's end. Kieran felt an unexpected pang at her words. That's good news, he said carefully, though his tone betrayed him. Olivia turned to study his face. Is it? Their eyes met, and Kieran found himself unable to maintain the pretense. No, he admitted. I've grown accustomed to your company, Olivia. A blush colored her cheeks, as I have yours. Perhaps, he began hesitantly, you might consider staying, not as my guest, but, she prompted, her heart racing. I find myself thinking of you constantly, Kieran confessed, your courage, your kindness. I know it's sudden, perhaps inappropriate given the circumstances, but I believe what I feel for you is genuine. Olivia's breath caught. Kieran, you don't need to answer now, he hastened to add. It's too soon, I know. But I wanted you to understand why the thought of you leaving affects me so deeply. Olivia reached out, placing her hand over his. I've never believed in fate or destiny, she said quietly, but when you appeared in my cabin doorway, something shifted inside me. I've tried to dismiss it as gratitude, but it's more. Kieran turned his hand to clasp hers. Then stay. Give us time to discover what this might become. The following weeks saw their relationship deepen as spring transitioned to early summer. Olivia continued teaching but rode to the ranch each weekend. Kieran courted her properly, mindful of her reputation in the small community. They picnicked by the now calm river, Olivia gradually overcoming her fear of the water with Kieran's gentle encouragement. He taught her to ride properly, delighting in her natural affinity for horses. She introduced him to poetry, reading aloud in the evenings as they sat before the fire. By midsummer, the town had largely recovered from the flood. New buildings stood where old ones had been washed away, and a memorial service honored the few souls lost in the outlying areas. Kieran stood beside Olivia at the service, her hand tucked securely in his. The townsfolk had accepted their courtship, especially after hearing the story of her rescue. Mrs. Cooper remained a staunch supporter, telling anyone who would listen that it was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. "Saving a woman from certain death," she would declare dramatically. "If that isn't true love, I don't know what is." One evening in late July, Kieran took Olivia to his favorite spot on the ranch, a hilltop overlooking the valley with the mountains beyond. They spread a blanket beneath a lone cottonwood tree, sharing a simple supper as the sun began its descent. "I've been thinking," Kieran said as they watched the sky turn gold and crimson, "about the future." Olivia turned to him, noting the serious expression on his face. "What about it? My future, your future?" He took her hands in his. "Our future, perhaps." Olivia's heart quickened. "Kieran, when I pulled you from that cabin, I had no idea how completely you would change my life," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "I thought I was content with my solitary existence, but now I can't imagine returning to it." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they were young. I've kept it, waiting for the right woman to wear it." Opening the box revealed a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "Olivia Evans, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked from the ring to Kieran's face, seeing all the love and hope reflected there. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. They were married in the Fort Collins church on a perfect September day. Catherine traveled from Denver with her husband, delighted to welcome Olivia to the family. Mrs. Cooper wept openly during the ceremony, claiming credit for fostering the romance. Olivia's students presented her with a handmade quilt as a wedding gift, each square representing their appreciation for their teacher. The couple's first year of marriage brought challenges and joys. Olivia continued teaching while helping Kieran expand the ranch. They added a wing to the house, including a library that soon became Olivia's favorite retreat. Kieran's horse breeding program flourished under her surprisingly astute business sense. When spring returned and the anniversary of their meeting approached, Kieran suggested they visit the site where Olivia's cabin had stood. The river flowed peacefully now, giving no hint of its previous violence. "Are you certain?" he asked as they dismounted their horses. "This might bring difficult memories." Olivia shook her head, taking his hand. "Not difficult, transformative. Everything I lost that day was simply material. What I gained was immeasurable." They stood together at the river's edge, the water reflecting the blue sky above. "I dream of it sometimes," Olivia admitted. "But in my dreams now, I'm never afraid. I know you'll come for me." Kieran squeezed her hand. "Always." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching another magnificent Colorado sunset, Olivia rested her head on Kieran's shoulder. "I have something to tell you," she said softly. "What is it, love?" he asked, his arm tightening around her. She took his hand and placed it gently against her stomach. "Come winter, our family will grow by one." Kieran stared at her in wonder, joy spreading across his features. "A baby." "We're having a baby," Olivia nodded, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. "A child of our own, a new beginning." He kissed her tenderly, then knelt before her to press his lips against her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Your mother is the bravest woman I've ever known, and I promise to tell you the story of how I found her, or perhaps how she found me." "How we found each other," Olivia corrected, running her fingers through his hair. "Against all odds, against the current." Their son was born the following January, a strong, healthy boy they named James after Kieran's father. He grew into a spirited child with his mother's copper hair and his father's blue eyes, equally at home in the classroom and on horseback. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, who inherited her father's quiet strength and her mother's love of books. The Prescott Ranch became known not only for its fine horses, but as a gathering place for the community, with Olivia establishing a small lending library that served the outlying farms and ranches. 10 years after the flood that brought them together, Kieran and Olivia stood once more on their porch, watching their children play in the yard with their dog. "Do you ever wonder," Kieran asked, his arm around his wife's waist, "what might have happened if I hadn't seen your cabin that day?" Olivia shook her head. "No, some things are simply meant to be, my love. I believe we would have found each other somehow." Kieran smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Perhaps, but I'm grateful for the river that brought you to me, even as it tried to take you away." "As am I," Olivia agreed, leaning into his embrace. "Every day I'm thankful for the current that carried me home.